Well, I was thinking, there we go. So yeah, please bear with us too. We're all sort of still adjusting to figuring out how to navigate all this online. We've done quite a few practice runs, but of course, I first want to just run down through some acknowledgements. This project would not be possible without the army of people, including all of yourselves that are volunteering and contributing to this project. I just wanted to highlight in particular, are folks able to see if I move my mouse on the screen?
Yes, we
Can
can see it.
somebody? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Pardon me. So we've already introduced and identified the staff. In addition to the staff from the outset of the project, even before it was funded, we organized a team of individuals from representing different agencies and organizations to serve as a steering committee. And so that has been an especially helpful group of people. And we further have a specific subset of us that are working on scientific and technical questions related to the Atlas. And I wanted to make a point of highlighting and recognizing all of our volunteer regional coordinators. So if you are not already aware, we have kind of birding experts around the state who have volunteered their time to help organize all of you. So sorry, I just got a message from somebody who was trying to get into the meeting but was having trouble. So yeah, you can just kind of, I'm not going to read these off, but you can get a look at individuals that we have a good team of people around the state to really help you with questions or problems. So if at any point you feel overwhelmed or discouraged, please just fall back on one of us with the staff or with the steering committee or any of our regional coordinators. We are all here to help you help us be successful with this project. So just a quick overview of today. We got started just about 5 minutes late, just to give people time to check in and get acquainted. So I will draw your attention just down to here at the 1.5 hour mark. We will hopefully have kind of a 5-minute opportunity at the very end for group questions. And then we will take a 15-minute break, and at which time we will assign you into, your breakout rooms for your kind of one-on-one Q&A question, or that's what Q&A means, sessions. Sorry, I'm juggling a lot of things in front of me and having multiple people text me about trying to get into the meeting. So moving on. I have to, of course, go through our obligatory virus elephant in the room. So as you all are very aware, we've had to cancel in-person meetings, and I just wanted to take a moment to really highlight the importance and the emphasis that the project is, we're taking this very seriously. And while we appreciate that this current situation and our civil state of emergency and everything that's going on has kind of provided a lot of people an even bigger opportunity to maybe engage with nature around them and contribute to a project like this that will help bring purpose to a lot of people who may be currently out of work. We want to give you some guidelines to do all of that and participate in the project safely. So we recently just posted on our project website instructions for volunteers specific to the project. And just to highlight some of those, I mean, the biggest one is that, I mean, I keep saying it, imagine if we had everybody in the state of Maine just submitting observations from their own property. That would be an amazing data set. So don't take the contribution that you could make by just contributing, birds you're seeing in and around your own yard or on your own land for granted. That would be really valuable to have. Of course, we, we're not discouraging people from going afield and finding areas to bird, and we'll be talking about, you know, trying to prioritize some of those trips around the state today. But again, we just want to encourage people to find less trafficked areas to visit if you're traveling away, and be prepared. If you're venturing afield to, you know, away from your own property, be prepared both in terms of having backup plans in case where you end up is busy or crowded, and both be prepared as far as supplies go. And really make smart decisions. This is not the time to experiment with your adventurous side and go places where you don't have prior experience or exposure. So, you know, logging roads are often great areas of the state of Maine to get out there and bird and get away from people, but they're also very good places to get yourself stuck and get in a pickle if you are not familiar with those remote woods roads of Maine. So this year would not be the year that we would encourage people to put themselves and others potentially at risk by increasing community transmission spread in emergent situations like that could result. A lot of places are closed down. Expect limited services. If you do have to stop for supplies, gas or food or whatever, please wear mask and gloves and use hand sanitizer. Don't linger, don't touch signs and handrails and posts and things that could easily be transmitting the disease. And of course, we all know how to practice social distancing now. So in all seriousness, you should at a minimum be keeping 6 feet away from anybody you're encountering that is not living under your roof. The virus has been documented now to be transmissible even up to 13 feet in certain situations. So there's still a lot we don't know. So, you know, this picture is obviously kind of joking about this. This is one of our regional coordinators, Mac Hunter, and his wife Aram, and they're chasing down an endemic flycatcher somewhere in the tropics, I forget. So obviously, you know, usually birding lends itself to social distancing anyway, but yeah, just don't do this and try to avoid group outings. Again, a full set of guidelines is online. So I don't want to take too much more time with that. Let's get right into the project finally. So what is the Maine Bird Atlas? For those of you who may be new to this project, it is a 5-year effort run by Inland Fisheries and Wildlife that is partnering professional Maine biologists and citizen scientists to document the abundance and distribution of all breeding and wintering birds across the entire state of Maine. So as far as why the Maine Bird Atlas, I don't think I really need to go into the value of birds and the roles they play in ecosystems and all of the facets of our life, because I'm assuming that you already have some appreciation since you are here today. You have some appreciation for birds and the value they provide. But let's look at some of the threats and challenges birds face in their daily lives that have contributed to widespread declines. You know, birds have this challenge of needing to find food, both as predators or generalists or herbivores. They have to avoid predators, challenges with weather systems and finding appropriate habitat. And then when we add influences onto the landscape, that just exacerbates the challenges that our birds around us are already facing by putting in additional buildings and, you know, creating window collisions, putting in structures that individuals have to navigate around safely, you know, sprawling developments and leading to loss of habitat and deforestation, introducing predators that are not native to the landscape and unfortunately are incredibly effective at hunting our beloved birds. And then of course all of the weather influences that and shifting landscape just as a result of climate change. So there's a lot of change on the landscape, loss of wetlands and areas for water birds, and just shifts overall that are really challenging the birds around us. And so the department is working with partners, other state agency partners, federal, nonprofits, and academic individuals to try to preserve, protect, and enhance resources for wild birds in Maine. And nearly a third of the birds in Maine, if we just look close to home, are species of greatest conservation need. So even with all that help, very hard to achieve preserving and protecting these resources without knowing where they are or how they're utilizing resources of the state. There was an early effort in the late 70s and early 80s, the original Atlas of Maine breeding birds, and this project made an attempt at kind of a comprehensive statewide survey. You can see on the right-hand side here, this is the distribution of blocks for that area, and anywhere that doesn't have shading has no data. And of the 704 blocks that were designated as the survey unit for that initial project, only 273 of those had minimum coverage and 243 were considered adequately covered. So there's still kind of a lot of room to improve our understanding of bird distribution around the state of Maine. So if we get back to that broad scale objective, again, just survey and map abundance and distribution of breeding and wintering birds. Of course, for this webinar, we're focusing on the breeding season. And so hopefully we'll have another event maybe in the fall to get everybody up to speed for wintering birds. And more specifically, if we get into some more specific project objectives, the first one, of course, is just to replicate that first atlas, to really define species breeding range limits, look at how patterns of diversity and distribution have changed since 35 plus years ago. For example, red-bellied woodpecker was not documented to occur in the state of Maine during that first atlas, and this is probably even now an outdated map from, this is just year one results for the species, and they're already pretty well distributed across at least the populated area of the state. The second main objective is to produce baseline abundance estimates, and that's obviously important for measuring population change over time and having more specific information to our main, for our Maine birds. There are a lot of national estimates out there. And there are some species specific estimates, like for loons, where we have a good amount of data already. But this kind of data is very lacking for the, for a comprehensive suite of species that occur in Maine. So this is another big goal. And this was not, aside from these individual species cases, has not been completed for the state. So that's why we refer to it as a baseline abundance. So hopefully we can have something to draw comparisons on 20 years from now, when this atlas is hopefully repeated again. Of course, identifying priority bird habitats and regions to inform management actions. This is a Bicknell's thrush. Bird use can be used to identify forest integrity, for example, and sustainable management practices. Some of our most vulnerable species, like the Bicknells or rusty blackbird, for example, are even dependent upon forestry practices to create suitable habitat. So again, it's hard to manage for these species unless we really have a better understanding of their broad distribution across the state. And finally, the last objective really is what hopefully brought all of you here today. We really hope that this project provides a platform for you all to connect on a deeper level with nature. I think one of the cool things about atlases is that it asks you to kind of take your interest in bird watching to the next level, to take it a little bit deeper and really pay closer attention to what the birds around you are doing. And I think when you really start connecting with nature on a deeper level, it's hard not to care more. And so that's a genuine objective that we're hoping, we can achieve through this project. And I think we're well on track given the response just for today's webinar. That's really heartening to see. So I'm already over my time. My apologies to my fellow presenters. We got a little delayed at the outset, so I'm going to stop there. I will stop sharing my screen, and we will transition now to Doug.
Seamless transition. Hopefully.
Do we need to adjust your, oh, you got it.
Sorry, working on it. It's you guys looking at the screen with just the title slide, or are you looking at my speaker notes?
Just the slide.
Fantastic. So I will try to do this very quickly just to get us back on schedule. Basically, I wanted to talk about some of the cool and interesting results that we're seeing. We'll look at some new species, increasing species, missing, and then I'll just tease some of the maps that we've got forthcoming with some of the effort and density stuff that is also going on in the background. So let me try to advance my slide and re-emphasize that this is just after the first two summers of breeding effort. So I just want to be especially clear on that, you know, these maps are not complete. If anything, they'll hopefully kind of expose some of the gaps and why we really need you all to be out there helping us fill these in. And especially, you know, it's also important to look at, you know, when we talk about this idea of like a species that, you know, seems to be either increasing or decreasing. This is especially compared to that first atlas I believe Adrian mentioned. So, you know, just because something looks like it's declining right now, like, you know, it needs to be, I guess, acknowledged that there's still 3 more summers worth of effort. So, you know, maybe it's just people haven't been going the right places yet. So again, these are preliminary results, but actually really cool. I find them fascinating to see, you know, the results as they're coming in. Just to real quickly say, like, because I know that there's people that are, you know, brand new to this. In the beginner session that I'll be walking you guys through later this afternoon, we'll really go into what all these breeding codes are. But if this is a new concept to someone, the idea that we essentially have different levels of evidence of breeding, which I'll refer to as possible, probable, and confirmed. When we refer to these blocks, I think Adrian said it before, but 9 square mile survey, and eBird is the citizen science database that we're just using to collect all these. So just as an example, I'll show you kind of a different series of maps from different sources, but here's just our current results of black-capped chickadee. You can see the varying shades, again, possible, probable, and confirmed, getting all the way up to that darkest color. There's the lightest shade of just observed. There was just a chickadee seen. But anyways, this kind of does a good job to help us kind of illustrate what we're, you know, looking at for results. The state is getting, you know, colored in quite nicely with results as they come in. So with that as a little primer, I'll mention some new species that, again, this is kind of in relation to the first atlas. What species have we been able to document breeding during this second atlas period? So in that first atlas, just the numbers, again, are 201 species were breeding in Maine and 14 were previously undocumented. So it's fun to see now this kind of step forward, how many more species There are some missing, which we'll talk about in a bit, but there are certainly some species that were not here during the time of that first atlas. So common murre and Manx shearwater, the photo here is of a pair of Manx shearwaters flying together. These are two species that we don't expect any of our volunteers to find breeding. Maybe if you are also working for Project Puffin one of these summers and you're out on Matinicus Rock, that's where both murres and common murres and Manx shearwaters have been successfully nesting during our atlas period. One that, especially if you hang out near any, especially rocky coastline of Maine throughout the summer, American oyster catcher is one that was first confirmed breeding in 1994. And we're now up to 4 blocks with confirmed records, another 7 probable and 2 possible. So nice to see that this species is getting a good toehold in Maine. King rail was a new one. There are some historical, I'll say likely records of breeding, but in terms of actually being documented for the atlas, so there was a king rail in Wells that returned for multiple years and was actually found with chicks. Merlin, our kind of medium-sized falcon in Maine, is steadily increasing, becoming more and more common. So here is kind of a preliminary map of what some of our results might look like, especially being able to compare to the first atlas. Again, that's what going to be one of the big important outcomes of this atlas, is looking at how these species have changed over that time period. So you can see, there were actually no merlins in the first atlas. They're here breeding now. We're, I believe, over 30 blocks that have confirmed merlin breeding records. And then just to show kind of our raw, these are, again, the maps that you would see going into the eBird Atlas portal with those darkest blocks showing the confirmed breeding records. But there's still quite a few probable in there. And this is just a very interesting species that's kind of expanding into Maine. And I see Evan made a good note there that there were 3 merlin observed in the first atlas, just no breeding records. So it is kind of an interesting thing to look at some of these species that, were here in the state at the time, but weren't necessarily breeding at the time. So sandhill crane and even great egret, which we kind of take for granted given how abundant they are nowadays. It wasn't until 1994 that the first great egrets were found nesting on Stratton Island, and that colony is still stable in the the Gulf off of, or the bay off of Pine Point. Sandhill cranes first nested in 2000 in Maine, so that's another nice satellite population that's really been expanding. We got a confirmed record for clay-colored sparrow last year, which there's only previously 1996 one had nested in Arundel, 2011 in Kennebunk Plains, and now this 2019 record in Brunswick is about the 3rd confirmed record for the species, and another was not represented as a breeder in the first atlas. Perhaps one of the more interesting changes to watch are some of the southern species expanding their range northward. Here's a little family group of fish crows, which really like the Krispy Kreme down in Saco. The dumpsters back behind there are a great place to find fish crows, which I heard that they might be closing shop, so who knows where these birds will get their handouts anymore. But something like our red-bellied woodpecker, another great example, Adrian mentioned it before, of a species. Here's a male bringing food into the nest, little food delivery there, good confirmed record. Crazy to think that this was a species that was not even breeding in the state in that first atlas, had very few site records even, and here are our current results. Quite a stronghold even up around the Waterville area. They're being seen as possible breeders in all the way up to Bangor, almost hitting down East Maine. So red-bellied woodpecker is a very interesting one as they respond to climate change. And Carolina wren, I didn't have a slide for, but that is another species that was not in the first atlas, but has now been confirmed since. Just a couple species that are noticeably increasing. Northern cardinal, this is maybe a more fun version of those atlas comparison maps to see the legend with the red arrow pointing down where they were in the first atlas, but we don't have records for this atlas yet. The orange circle where they're breeding in both, and then the black arrow pointing up for breeding in the second atlas only. So again, remember these are preliminary results. So where you see, I think especially some of those, the red arrows pointing down for Northern Cardinal, I imagine, not to bias anyone's observations when you go out, but I imagine if we just put in the effort in those blocks, or quads in this case, it'll be interesting to watch that change. And then one, if I could watch all of your responses or reactions on the video, this is one of my favorite conservation success stories in the state of Maine. Wild turkeys are probably one of the most successful breeders that we have around. If we look back at the first atlas, which the map on the left shows, that first atlas was done just after the reintroduction effort. There was a time that wild turkeys were completely extirpated from the state of Maine, so you could not find a wild turkey in the state. But you can see the reintroduction efforts on that map on the left in the mid-coast area and then down in York County. And then that map on the right, our current, again, preliminary findings on where these wild turkeys are. But you can see, it's amazing to me they're all the way up into Aroostook County, confirmed breeding records in the Western Mountains. Certainly no shortage of records here. And sorry, I see some questions in the chat, and I was a little distracted during Adrian's talk, so I just want to be clear if she didn't mention it. As I said, the original atlas, I'm referring to the first atlas that was done, Atlas of Breeding Birds of Maine from 1978 to 83. So that's the comparison we're making here. I'll just stop reading those comments because it's just going to confuse me. So missing species, these are birds that we know have bred in the state before, but so far for the atlas, we don't have any confirmed breeding records. So redhead, the duck on the left, and northern pintail have both bred in the state before. Most of the records are from northern Aroostook County, so we've got some great birders up there that I'm sure would help find them. But as you can see on some of the effort maps, it would be wonderful if more people were up looking. I believe ruddy duck and lesser scaup are two other ducks that have historically bred in Maine before, but we don't have records for the atlas yet. Yellow-billed cuckoo is an interesting one in that I would say it's probably one of the most abundant birds in Maine in the summer that is yet to get a confirmed breeding record. They're a very secretive species with some, particular habitats that they really like, but it's amazing to me that we still don't have a single confirmed record for them. So the map that you see here is not breeding records, but it's just looking at records from June and July, because if you're a yellow-billed cuckoo in Maine in June and July, you're probably trying to breed. So you can see they're kind of all along that, southern, especially coastal area. Brownfield bog, getting inland is a great place to find them throughout the summer. So a good one for people to go track down. Common Gallinule, American Coot are both rare breeders, only have one probable record so far. We'll do this really quickly just to try and get us back on schedule. Least Bittern only has 3 possible and 1 probable record so far. Again, these maps are showing the results from that first atlas, which Evan actually posted a link to. You can find it on the homepage for the bird atlas and look at these maps yourself. Philadelphia vireo is probably right behind yellow-billed cuckoo in terms of one of the more abundant birds that's here in the state breeding, but we don't have confirmed breeding records for yet. And then just to show their map of our current results, horned lark, we've got 1 probable record so far, actually no possible. And then just a quick list of some other species, probably on the much rarer side, most only single or much older historic breeding records for the state. I'm sure eastern screech owls are nesting somewhere in York County. We just need more people maybe putting boxes in their backyard to find them. And I'll just quickly mention there's some wonky stuff going on in especially the Scarborough Marsh area. Some interesting, most likely hybrid herons. Someday we could, make our guesses on why this heron species, it clearly seems to be some type of hybrid, but as it keeps showing up each year, it looks more and more like it has little egret genes in it, which would be one of the first breeding records for North America. It would be the first. So there's maybe some more exciting things to come out of the atlas. So again, emphasizing possibly declining. We need more effort, but when you start looking at things like bank swallows and comparisons to the previous atlas, it's pretty dire to see some of the declines. Same thing with eastern whippoorwill, a species that most people who grew up in Maine will tell you how annoyed they were by the number of whippoorwills keeping them up all night. Now it's still locally common. You can track down where to find them, but a hard species to find, apparently because of their declines. Because I'm at my time, I'm just gonna jump ahead to some effort results because these are super impressive. Just the number of blocks, the amount of effort that's coming in already. You can find this on ebird.org/atlasme. It's showing each block and how much effort has gone into each. It's just the image you're looking at right now is toggled between terrain and hybrid because I think it's just easier to see with a little contrast on those blocks that have less time in them. One point I really wanted to make is that we're really going to be pushing people to get to these priority blocks. And even though there's, looking at that map, there's a lot of remote areas in the state that look like they need effort. And it's hard to get your orientation on this map, but that star is right. That's Maine's capital. We're looking at Augusta with this overlay of blocks and how much effort goes into each. And there's, within about a 15-mile radius of Augusta, there's around 22 priority blocks that still need completing. So we're not looking for people to go too remote. There's most likely these priority blocks near you. For the sake of time, I'll just say the winter results are looking pretty good. Certainly more effort will be needed. Preliminary maps of one of our more common American crow. And I'll wrap this up by saying it's amazing to me to look at the effort coming in. This is just a quick breakdown by county. You can obviously see there's a bias towards counties that have more people. Cumberland County, close to, was that 5,000 hours? So in a little bit, Adrian's going to talk about making sure that your time counts and how you can document your time as a volunteer. And so just to give you these numbers real quick, the total is over 30,000 hours, which is over 1,200 days, almost 3.5 years. But if you were to divide that up by a 40-hour work week, you're now doing, it's 14.6 years worth of, someone's 40-hour work week. So I like showing that because, we still have quite a ways to go. And this, to me, really emphasizes why we need volunteers like you helping, getting out to these blocks. And, that's the only way we'll ensure that this project will be a success. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen, trying to get us back on schedule. Thank you for listening to me talk very quickly.
Thank you, Doug. You didn't have to rush through that, but I appreciate you getting us back on schedule. My cat has joined, one of my happy indoor kitties, two, has joined the meeting while Glenn goes about sharing his screen and prepping for his presentation. I will just mention too that our intent was to have an entire day-long event to kick this season off, and so we're basically cramming an entire day now into this 3-hour webinar. So our apologies if it's a lot at once. Please don't get too nervous about stuff you're hearing that you may not be familiar with. That's why we have the workshops scheduled at the end to help everybody ask questions that they need to and get folks up to speed. So Glenn is going to continue with kind of the basics on how to get involved and kind of our priorities now going into year 3 of this 5-year project.
Thanks, Adrienne. Hopefully, I've learned that I need to keep my my video off or my audio quality goes downhill. So hopefully everyone can hear me well enough and can see the screen slides. So I'm going to try to talk about some bird atlas basics or best practices for everyone. Right from beginner atlasers right through to advanced. And so if you're new to eBirding and the Maine Bird Atlas, some of this may seem a little confusing, but it should clear up with the breakout workshops if some of the things I present seem a little confusing. Hang on, having trouble advancing my slide. Let me try again. So let me try closing that down and opening it again. See if that's going to work better. There we go. Getting the slides to advance now. So just to back up and talk about what a breeding bird atlas is, I'm going to be just focusing on the breeding bird atlas aspect of things first. And what it is a population monitoring survey. So it's a grid-based survey. Each of those grid cells is 3 miles on a side. And the goal is to document the breeding birds within each of those grid cells. And with these, it's a population monitoring survey. The survey is generally completed in 5 years and repeated every 20 to 25 years. And so I like to think about, why is it important to do this? And so I'm going to give you 3 reasons of why I personally get out early in the morning out into the boonies of Maine to put in all this effort to atlas. And the first reason for me is that a breeding bird atlas is a population monitoring survey. And I've mentioned it, that it should be done every 20 to 25 years. It's been 35 years since Maine's first breeding bird atlas, so we're definitely overdue. It's time to have another one of these monitoring surveys. And the second reason why I atlas is you may have heard that there are certain groups of birds that are declining across North America. And we don't know if these trends are holding in Maine. And a breeding bird atlas survey is one way to figure that out. And the last reason, and I think for me this is the most important, is I really see this as something we're doing for the next generation of Maine biologists. We're really putting in the effort to try to set down a nice benchmark for where we stand currently with bird populations in Maine, so that they'll be able to, in the future, assess change. So I think of it as, you know, I'm working for the next generation of Maine biologists. And that, for me personally, that's really what drives me to get out in the field and put in the effort with this atlas. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some best practices for the Maine Bird Atlas. And the first best practice is knowing how to find our website. So it's maine.gov/birdatlas. And there's a lot of good information there. I'd encourage you all to go and check it out. You can get a lot of answers there. And I'm going to talk about 3 other best practices for atlasing. And the first is location. So earlier I mentioned that a breeding bird atlas is a grid-based survey, and you're supposed to figure out the birds in each of those grid cells. Maine has over 4,000 of them. And so you got to know where they are, and you got to know where those grid cells are to be able to do that. So how the heck do you do that? And it's important because, for example, if you're on Peaks Island, you go for a 15 or 20-minute hike, you might cross into 4 separate blocks on that short hike. Possibly your location around your home, you know, maybe it's in the center of the block. Maybe you don't, in the places you normally visit, you don't have to pay attention. You aren't near a block boundary. So we need to know how to look these up. And I believe this is true, that the block boundaries are now on the maps within the eBird app. If you use eBird on your smartphone, if you're not seeing those block boundaries, try updating your eBird app. And if they aren't on there yet, they should be soon. So what I do, this is kind of, you know, when I go out into an area and bird, this is what I do as a best practice. I go to the Maine Bird Atlas website. This is the home page that you see, and you click on this tool in the upper right-hand corner, interactive block map. And that pulls up a map of Maine that shows you all the block boundaries for the whole state. And you can click on a block, you can zoom in, find a block where you want to get more info, and click on that block, and you can download or open up on your computer a map, a topographic map, and an aerial photo map of that block. And so that exists for all 4,000 atlas blocks in Maine. So first stop, this is my first stop when I'm going out birding in an area, is go and print out a block map and take it in the field. For those of you who use smartphones in the field, you can actually get a free Google Earth app on your phone and you can download all of these block boundaries onto your phone as well. Again, if you go to the Maine Bird Atlas homepage and click on that Resources and Materials tab, you can download the Atlas grid that can get uploaded into Google Earth and some instructions for how to do that. So that's also a best practice for figuring out where these block boundaries are. And the third thing that we suggest for block boundaries, figuring out block boundaries, is maybe I decide to go for a long hike. You know, I might be hiking for 10 miles and I forgot to download and print out the block maps, and I'm out of cell phone coverage. So what do? Actually, if you're entering records on your phone, the eBird app tracks your location. It doesn't need a cell phone signal in order to track location. So that works. Just keep your traveling checklist short if you don't know where the boundaries are, block boundaries are. If you're new to eBird, in the breakout session, what that means should become a little more clear. So next I want to talk about priority blocks, because we have a new focus now on trying to finish as many priority blocks as we can in the state. So to try to explain what that means is, you know, Maine's divided into around 4,000 grid cells. And we know we don't have the number of people to get good bird records from all 4,000 atlas blocks. So we made a subset of them. And those are all the green and pink squares here on the map. And we define those as being for priority surveying. So at the end of the Atlas project, 3 years from now, we want to have as a minimum really good data from all those green and pink blocks on this map. And they cover the whole state. Those are not necessarily the best birding areas, and those are not necessarily the funnest areas to bird in, but they'll give us an adequate representation of the birds across the whole state. So with our new focus on priority blocks, I want to be clear here what we're suggesting and what we're not saying. And so what we're suggesting is, if you have a choice for where to bird, choose a priority block to bird in, particularly one that isn't completed yet. And I'll be showing you how to look that up here in a second. But let me further explain so we can avoid some confusion. Yes, we still want bird records from any block in Maine. Yes, even from those not designated as priority. Again, we want the best data that we can get. But priority blocks are kind of the minimum ones that we want to get completed. So if you typically bird in a block not designated as priority, I've got 2 blocks that I normally walk in by my house. They're non-priority blocks. I put all those records in the Atlas because, yes, those data are still extremely valuable to the Atlas. So it's really, our focus on priority blocks just applies for if you have a choice for where to bird. And now I'm going to show you how to look this up. You know, I've been talking about priority blocks. How do you find them? How do you find the closest priority block to your home? So there's a couple ways you can do that. And I'm going to show you a way by going to the Bird Atlas homepage, where all the breeding records for the Atlas are entered. So if you go to ebird.org/atlasme, that's the home page that shows up. And if you click on this Explorer tab, you get taken to this page with, you can look up a lot of good things. I've explained that this is where all the breeding records for the Atlas are entered here. So some of the maps that Doug was showing, you can look those up. And these are all updated in real time. So every hour or every day or something, they're all updated. So it's really up-to-date information. But if you click on this Atlas effort map, it's a really useful way to figure out where the block boundaries are, where the priority blocks are near you. And Doug showed a similar map in his talk. So this is the down East Coast. That's Jonesport and Addison, Harrington, Millbridge. That's about a half an hour or an hour away from my house. So this map is showing us a bunch of very useful things. It's showing us which blocks are termed completed. These black ones, there's 2 of them. Now here, the dark outline around a block, that's a priority block. And there's a lot of them here. Look at that, a whole bunch. And these are, not that far from where I live. I could go visit one of those. But even better is you can look at how much effort has been put into these blocks. If I wanted to say, I want to go and burden a priority block near my house that really doesn't have a lot of bird data entered yet in the first 2 years of the atlas. Go to this map, the effort map, and I look for dark circled blocks with that are yellow in color. Those have less than 5 hours of effort. Look, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 of them here. So this is a really useful way to figure out where to bird if you're going to consider going and birding in a new place. And the neat thing about this, since all the breeding records for the whole atlas are entered here, these update real time. So if I go and bird in one of these blocks, within a couple hours, you'll be able to see those records, see what I've done, and know what's still left to do in that block. And now I need to touch on the last topic here, is where to enter your records. And I've touched on this a little bit in talking about priority blocks. So I've mentioned that this Maine Bird Atlas eBird webpage is where all the breeding records go for the Maine Bird Atlas. And there's ways to enter records on your phone into that website, and also on your computer. So I bookmark these on my computer. I know how to change where records get entered on your phone. This will get explained in the breakout workshop. So if you're confused by that, it'll get explained a little further in a bit. But I don't want this to be a deterrent to folks. Remember, back in the 70s and 80s, Maine did a first breeding bird atlas. All that was done on paper, then compiled by hand. That still works for this effort. So if you get intimidated by eBird, paper still works. You can mail them in. We have a group of volunteers who will enter this into the right websites for getting that breeding information up. But the eBird app is fairly simple to use, and it's actually quite fun. It has a lot of nice features to keep track of your personal breeding or your personal birding data. And so I'd encourage you to at least give it a try if you haven't already. So if you go to the Maine Bird Atlas website and click on the Submit Data button on the home page, there'll be links to both of those, to places where you can enter your birding records, your Maine birding records. Now here's where it gets a little confusing, is we've actually got 2 places to enter records. Now I've been talking about this Maine Bird Atlas eBird website, where all the breeding records, we want all the breeding records to go in there. So where do you want the other records? Winter, migration records, we have another site for that. And the reason we need to split these, we kind of saw that when we were looking at the effort map. We just want the breeding effort entered into this breeding website. That's where those breeding records go. So let me just back up a slide. When you hit that Submit Data button from the Maine Bird Atlas webpage, this chart is right at the top of the page there. And it helps you decide where we want the bird records that you're getting. And so maybe, let's say this morning I was sitting on the porch here at my office and I made a list of birds that I saw over half an hour. Now, it's pretty early in the season, and a lot of birds are migrants and not necessarily breeding. So let's say the list of birds up from my porch over half an hour this morning I didn't see any breeding behaviors of any of the birds I was watching. Where do you want that list of birds I saw? Well, no species on my list exhibited any breeding behaviors. So that we want that record, that whole checklist to go into the Maine eBird website, ebird.org/ME. You'll learn in a little bit in the workshops how to find that on your phone app as well. So let's say instead this morning, I made a list of birds. Most of them were migrants, but I saw a pair of mourning doves repeatedly going into a site that looked like, yeah, there's probably a nest in there that they're working on. So I had a breeding behavior on the list, along with a whole bunch of migrants. So where does that list go? And so we saw on the list, there was at least one species with the breeding behaviors. The whole list, the one breeding bird and all the migrants I saw, we want to go into this breeding portal, the Maine Bird Atlas portal for all the breeding records. And I hope that makes sense. And if it's confusing at all, I think it should be cleared up a little bit in the breakout workshops that are coming up. And I know there's going to be a bunch of questions even after this training kickoff meeting. So what to do when questions come up. And so your first go-to should really be going to look at the Maine Bird Atlas website. There's a lot of good information there to answer questions. You can find a list of regional coordinators, which is somebody close to you who can help answer some questions. We also have weekly Atlas question and answer sessions. There are smaller groups where you can get one-on-one help with any questions that you're running into. And you can get links to those weekly Atlas Q&A sessions from the Maine Bird Atlas Facebook group. But you can also email us at mainbirdatlas@gmail.com. You're running into trouble, send us an email. Let's see if we can help you out. And with that, I've finished up my section. And it looks like we're switching over to Logan next to start talking about some special species surveys and guidance on tricky species to identify.
All right, great. Thank you, Glenn. All right, let me get my screen going here. Okay. Hope you guys can see that okay. Okay, so I'm going to cover special species projects and some guidance on going after some of these species in your Atlas blocks. And what makes these special species, they're not better than any other species. They're actually species that are, let me see, there we go. So these are species that are harder to detect, either due to the habitat that they're in or their behavior. So, you know, like this American bittern here, you know, it requires some extra work to go out and find a species like this. So to address this, we've designed a number of projects that target these different birds. And the spectrum for taking part in these projects is, you know, it's from beginner to advanced birder. They have some advantages in that because they're targeted, you're looking for, you know, a handful of species instead of going out and documenting everything necessarily. So yeah, the range of, you know, skill that can be used here. And one of the advantages of these projects is that they're making our Atlas project far more comprehensive. So instead of just going out and doing general atlasing, which is extremely valuable, we're also going out and specifically looking for these different species that might otherwise fall through the cracks. And you'll see that there's actually a lot of connection to, you know, Doug's presentation, where he had there were some gaps where we hadn't found some of these species, or there were species that were priorities. You'll see some of those coming up as targets of our projects. So one of our projects is the Adopt a Marsh project. We have, you know, hundreds of marshes that have been identified throughout the state that folks can adopt and conduct surveys in. It's a single season survey where you're going out, you're going to go out 3 times in the height of the breeding season, and you're going to go and document these 9 target species that we're looking for primarily. And I've got links throughout this presentation. I'm going to make this presentation available after the fact, but I'll also post some of these links into the chat following the presentation. So we do have a map that's available online where you can see all of the marshes that are currently unadopted. We've had a great number of participants so far. We've had more than 100 marshes adopted, so we're off to a good start, but we could definitely use a lot more help. So these are the 9 target species here. These are the ones that you'd need to be able to identify by sight and by sound. And we have a number of resources online for you to get more familiar with these species, but we're looking for pie-billed grebe, American bittern, least bittern. So some of these species that, you know, are in, you know, densely vegetated wetland areas that can be tough to find. Or, you know, like the American coot, you know, it's a species that we're really not, we haven't been able to document up to this point. And so how these work is essentially you're going out into these marshes, you're doing a playback survey. So we set you up with a recording, you play it, and you listen for responses from any of these target species. All right, another project of ours is our nightjar monitoring project. And this project is primarily focused on the eastern whippoorwill and common nighthawk. So folks that participate in this project would be adopting a nightjar monitoring route. They go out and they conduct a series of surveys throughout the breeding season, once at sunset, another at following the moonrise, and that's targeting these species specifically. But we also ask folks to document, you know, the other birds that they hear. So, you know, particularly at dusk, you'll have thrushes, you'll have, you know, warblers out singing, but these are the 2 that we're really, really focused in on. So we have a number of resources available online for this project as well, mainenightjar.com. You know, there's species profiles where you can see the, you know, the various species that we're looking at or you're likely to encounter. There's descriptions and, you know, recordings that folks can listen to. And then, you know, if you want to join this project, you can certainly email me identifying the project you want to work on. And then we have a number of routes available online as well. So we have a nest box monitoring project. So this is something that we started last year. We were primarily looking at eastern bluebird, American kestrel, and our two smaller owl species, northern saw-whet owl and eastern screech owl. And we were supplied with material to make a number of boxes, and we set up guidance for building your own boxes, and allowing people to go out and make observations in the field, right in their backyard most of the time. And so we have all those materials available online. We have handbooks for each of these, but this kind of presents a unique opportunity where you can go and make observations, confirm species relatively easy, right in your backyard. And some of these are, conservation priority species or species that are otherwise difficult to document. So we're expanding that effort this year. We're adding swallows to the project. So we have a number of tree swallow boxes that we have prepared. And then we also have a number of artificial cliff swallow nests. So these are made to imitate, the nests that cliff swallows make. And we deploy these at colony sites. And the cliff swallows can then finish the nests and, make use of those nests for the season. So you'd be going in and making weekly observations at that colony site, and hopefully confirming these species. So this project, kind of is dual purpose in that we're collecting records for the atlas, but we're also adding, these safe areas for these species to nest and creating more nesting habitat, because oftentimes, these species are declining due to, the loss of the sites where they were historically nesting. So we also have a number of guidance materials available online. So if you want to go out and do some atlasing in your block, or just in your local area, and you want to focus on some of these special species, we've got guidance on colonial water birds, so your egrets and herons, ibises, secretive wetland species. It's fairly long list of species that live in wetland areas and are more challenging to document, and then nocturnal and species that are active at dusk. So most of us are out birding first thing in the morning. It's really worthwhile to go out and spend a few hours out at night going after owls and night jars and other interesting species. And then cavity nesting birds, as we went over. And then we're going to have guidance on monitoring grassland birds soon as well. So we only have a short time to talk about these today, but we do have a couple of webinars that are coming up on marsh bird monitoring on the Adopt a Marsh program. That's next weekend at 1 o'clock. It'll be an hour or so to really get into that project. You can go and RSVP at the link there. And then the following week, we'll go over nightjar monitoring and all the nitty-gritty of that project. So if you are interested, I definitely encourage you to volunteer. We still have plenty of marshes available, and we still have a number of nightjar monitoring routes that are available. So would definitely encourage you guys to get out and join us for that. So the information for all of these projects can be found at that first link there. We have all the guidance documents, links to all the projects, everything is right up there. And if you're interested in taking part in any of these, or you need some help with going after some of these species, you can email me, just include the project you're interested in the subject line. Okay, and with that, I think we're going back to Adrian.
All right. Thanks, Logan. Thank you, everyone. That was really well done to keep us sort of on time given technical difficulties. I hope that you all are sort of still staying with us. I know we've zoomed through quite a bit. So I am just going to briefly go through how to keep track of your time, your volunteer time, and the importance of tracking that. And then we will take a break. Well, after that, I'll give some further instructions for the remainder of the afternoon session. And then we'll break and resume in our respective rooms. We've been navigating some technical difficulties in the background throughout this entire thing. So we'll have some updates for you as we get through this. I am, yes, just going to talk about the importance of tracking volunteer time and miles. So why in the world does that matter? For those of you who might not be aware, this entire project is being funded through the State Department, but using federal dollars. And those federal dollars, of course, come with a catch. And that catch is that we have to provide match for that investment that they're making in this project. And so the match is a 75-25. So this is a project that in its entirety by the completion will have consumed over $2 million. And so the Department of Fish and Wildlife does not have a spare $500,000 sitting around to provide as match. But thankfully we can use your time and effort as volunteers as match for this project. So basically your involvement in this project and keeping track of that is what is enabling us to fund it. It would not be possible without you as volunteers in more ways than one, both the bird observations and also just being able to provide the funding to keep the staff employed and to keep this whole thing running. So that's the why. And your next question may be, for those of you who are at least familiar with eBird, well, doesn't eBird do this? So eBird does track effort. It only tracks effort of active survey time. But for meeting these match requirements, all of your time and miles are valuable for this purpose. So what we want you to actually keep track of expands from travel time to and from your field sites, any miles you accumulate while traveling to and from your field sites, time prepping for field surveys, whether you're just studying your field guides, whether you're printing maps, reviewing block boundaries, anything that, you know, if you're reading the COVID guidelines, whatever you might find on our websites, or if you're learning eBird for the purpose of entering this data for the project, that all counts as valuable volunteer time for this match. Again, the eBird time spent surveying, but we want you to just submit an actual, you know, total for each day, which I'll get into. Time entering that data, so whether you're entering your bird observations in eBird or you're actually entering your volunteer time and miles and keeping track of that, that all going to add up to be valuable match for us. And then your hours spent this afternoon just participating in this kickoff meeting and any other events that you might attend, that all counts. And these are just some examples. Of course, our regional coordinators have much more things that they're involved in that could count, but this is, you know, these are all examples of things that we really are hoping that you keep kind of a rough idea of your time investment in, so that we can use as match for this project. So I'm sure you're now all saying, okay, Adrian, well, we know what we are supposed to keep track of. How the heck do I enter it? Whoops. So let me share a different screen now. And I will take you online, hopefully. This will work, and I will show you. Oh, I have so many windows open. hopefully you all are seeing the homepage of our website. Evan, could you just turn your mic on and tell me if you are seeing that?
You're good, Adrian.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Perfect. So on the homepage of our website, which we'll provide you the links for, you will see that we have added this button up here in the navigation bar that says enter your time and miles. So when you click that, it will take you to this page that is an external site we have built for the department, the entire Department of Fisheries and Wildlife, this citizen science portal. This is just the page for the Maine Bird Atlas. Depending on, and so then you can scroll down and you can see on the page all of the things that I just talked about what kind of information we want you to submit and the importance of that information. And for what it's worth, the state values volunteer time on a per hourly rate more than myself. So the per hourly rate that they actually provide as match for volunteer time is more than what I get paid on an hourly rate, which is quite interesting. So if you didn't think that you were important or valuable, you are. Or I don't know what that says about me. So anyway, depending on the screen resolution that you have, you may have to click on this little drop-down box, or this option might be just visible at the top of your page, but I am getting a little ahead of myself. I want to walk you through first how you need to register. So I apologize that we had to set up a whole separate system for you to sign up with. So if you have adopted a block, or if you have an eBird account, you might be feeling like, okay, well, doesn't that set me up for the project? But we need you to register with the state as an official volunteer. None of those other programs actually gets you linked as an official volunteer. In the past, we would have had to even mail you, a paper copy of the volunteer agreement, but we have done everything online now. So if you have not already signed up on this portal, you want to come to this page and you're going to click register. And I'll just show you a little bit from this page. When you click register, you'll end up in this kind of setup where you have to enter your email and your password. If you find that you get stuck and you cannot move forward, notice that there's kind of little orange instructional things at the bottom. So here my passwords do not match. So I now already forget what I typed in as my test password. So let me just recreate that here. There we go. So now I can move on. Your phone number, it has to be in this specific format. So I'll just put my office number in. And then when you click next here, I don't even know. Yeah, sure, whatever. No, I'll save. Oh, okay. So I just wanted to take you to this place because a lot of people have questions. So the perk of also signing up as a volunteer with the state of Maine is that it entitles you, while working for the Atlas or doing any Atlas related activities, it entitles you to basically liability insurance for anything that might happen. So if you have your own insurance and just prefer to use that, that's great. If you would like to take advantage of being enrolled in the state's accident plan so that you're covered while working as a volunteer for this project, you can enroll. And it's as simple as that. You can click on this link here to give you information if you have questions about it. And then you'll just proceed through these steps to get yourself registered. I'm not going to complete that here. Once you're registered in the program, you'll want to come back to, this point where you can enter your time in miles. And then now's where you might want to drop this down, or at least look for your option to sign in once you've registered. So when you get to the point where you can sign in, this is what you will see. And I will just show you lots of settings. Great. Okay, so I don't want to see that anymore. So the only thing that's different here is that I have biologist privileges. So you will only see an option for you to enter time for yourself. I can view every individual that has submitted or registered as a volunteer. And so just to show you an example of what you will see, I'll pick on Bob and Sandy Duchesne, two of our regional coordinators. So you'll see that it's a very simple, straightforward. When you go to enter time, all you need to do is pick a date, the total number of hours on that date. Again, just an estimate of what you contributed towards this project. And if you drove miles or not, it's optional. And you can add new rows, delete them as need be. And then you'll see we get this kind of list of hours of time for individual volunteers. And then we, as the state, can go in and harvest this information out to provide to the federal level for serving those match purposes. I'm gonna pick on a couple people just for a case in point. So I've been very pleased to see that a lot of folks have actually registered as volunteers. This list of names is quite lengthy and it's great, but there is very little actual data in here. So I love that everybody, has gotten the message, and so many people got the message and took that first step to register. But now we just need that follow through for you to go in. And so Chris Louie is another one of our regional coordinators, so I'm picking on him. He's not alone. Most of these actual, and again, don't take this personally, but most of these files don't actually have the time submitted yet. So this is just kind of a case in point reminder that I appreciate that you guys went in and registered as volunteers, but don't forget to submit your information. And so this might look pretty impressive, but we all know for Bob Duchesne, he's done way more than what's documented here. So Bob, if you're listening. Okay, so I will stop there. I'm gonna go back to
Adrian, we have some questions from chat that I don't know the answers to. So
okay.
Let's see. So hold on. One was a statement. Someone was pointing out that eBird hours don't count unless the birder has registered as a citizen scientist with the state. That is correct, right?
That is correct. And I will just say, so everything will be kind of harvested out of that data set retroactively as well. So if you have time or an estimate of time, even from 2018 and 19, please go in and enter it. You can start from, whenever you have the information. Whoops, I did not mean to do that. And what we're going to do for 2018 especially is go back and we can harvest the eBird data for that year if people didn't keep track of that. But that eBird data at a minimum is not going to count correct unless you've officially registered as a volunteer. So we can use that active eBird survey time as match, but only if you've registered as a volunteer. But it would be helpful for us if everybody could just enter their totals also in this program. If you decide that you don't want to keep track of your hours outside of your eBird survey effort, then yes, at least you're registered here and we can use that eBird survey effort. That is correct.
There was a question, I think you answered this, but just to clarify, the you want the number of hours, well, I'll start my video just for fun. You want the number of hours inclusive of the amount of time you spend birding, right? It's the amount of time that you track the eBird and the other hours that you have too.
Yes, please.
Okay. There were lots of questions on what we do about when we don't have the hours from 2018-19. I think the best thing to do is just try to do your best to track it moving forward. If there's a way to go back and get the data from 2018-19, that would be great.
Yeah, I would say if you don't have that information, again, just make sure you're registered, track it from here on forward, and at least that information from 2018 and 19, we can pull your eBird survey effort.
Right. So someone in chat is pointing out they haven't kept track of their time, but they do have all their checklists in eBird, and you can probably make some good guesstimates about how much time you spent driving and prepping for some of these things. And that all seems reasonable, right?
Yes.
Okay. There was another question about can we enter data for 2020 if we started owl surveys? And the answer is of course, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It all counts.
Okay. I think I got all the questions. You kind of answered a couple in your answer to the first question.
Okay.
But I think we're all good in chat now.
Okay, so I'm going to, we're just about 10 minutes behind schedule, so let us plan to regroup here at, let's say like 2, I don't know, maybe like 10 to 4, give us like 10 or 15 minutes to get things set up. While we are transitioning into our afternoon breakout groups, I just wanted to put up this kind of summary slide for our website. So it can get a little confusing because there's a lot of different sources of information online for this project. So if it helps me to have these kind of bookmarked or favorited in my computer so I can just go to them. I would say when you get confused, or if you get confused, I shouldn't assume everybody's going to get confused. The best starting point, again, as Glenn mentioned, is just go back to the Maine project website. And this is the Maine project website. This will link to everything else that you need. It's very easy to get lost in a lot of other web pages, but just, you can always go back to here and kind of find your way. The other two that we're hoping that you get familiar with and save are the 2 eBird pages. So the URLs for these 2 eBird links, this one is for the Maine Bird Atlas, as Glenn highlighted. This is just for breeding bird observations, and then for any observations of birds outside of their breeding time, you want to enter it into just the regular Maine eBird portal.